All good. Aloha, folks. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. If you could find your seats. Rowdy crowd today. I love it. That explains you, Mike, right? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's Princeville Moʻolelo collaboration. Delighted to see all of you here in the room, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us on Zoom. Just to let everyone know, please be mindful of your background noise for the Zoom folks. And for you on camera or on Zoom, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll bring those into the room via the very talented Louise and Patty, who are over here managing that. So I would be happy to bring your questions in here. So great to see, once again, our community coming together in conversation about the work that we do and the wildlife that we care so much for, and these spaces that are so important to help protect them. So just as a reminder, this whole series is a collaboration between the Friends Group and the Princeville at Hanalei Community Association Events Committee. So really a great partnership of bringing the community together and have all of these wonderful voices every month come and share all of their knowledge with us. So as a Friends Group, we've been around for 41 years with the basic question asked, how can we, what do you need and how can we help of our refuge partners? And we do that in support of these incredible places that are so valued by us, our island, and of course, the wildlife that we're here to protect. So Kilauea Point National Wildlife Refuge, of course, is a refuge for seabirds, but our conversation today is going to focus on these beautiful places of Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge, Huleia National Wildlife Refuge, and of course the other wetlands of our islands that are so important to us, protecting the wildlife, and a whole host of wildlife depends upon these spaces, as well as filtering water and helping to restore the freshwater systems of our island, providing buffers for storm systems, and just so much more that these folks who know all about it are going to be so delighted to share with us. So with that, again, just why are we here as a Friends Group? We are here in service of our refuge partners and these the native Hawaiian wetland and seabirds that desperately need our voice, our advocacy, our generosity, and all of our hard work. So I see that reflected here in the beautiful faces today. And again, thank you so much for joining us in our conversation. Just again, the quick plug of how we help and how your generosity flows through our Friends Group in service of our refuges. First and foremost, the money that we raise through our nature store and the generous contributions from our community are fed back right into our refuges through contributions of programs that need funding. We fill in those gaps in places that just need that little bit of extra, and it makes a big difference. A little bit, it makes a big difference. But first and foremost, just making sure that spaces are native plant restoration, wildlife monitoring, conservation programs, just a whole host of things that our refuges do on a daily basis. And when they find a puka, they come to us and ask for help. And we're able to do that thanks to you. One of the other things that we're so very proud of is serving as an arm of bringing the story and the work of the wildlife out into the community, which is what we're doing here tonight. And we do that so well out at Kilauea Point, where we have the real pleasure of seeing thousands of people every day come through those doors. And there's Patty. She's making the, she made the slides. So this is one of our incredible board members and volunteers out there just interacting with tomorrow's community members and conservation gurus. You never know, the inspiration of some sweet little ones like that through our activities. And the conversations that we enjoy with family members around that table, you just really never know how that can manifest into some greatness. One of the things, of course, we're very pleased about is our partnership with Save Our Shearwaters. And often we're speaking about how they help some of the seabirds, but in particular today, as we speak about avian botulism, they are the incredible response partner that helps provide that next level of support for all of the birds impacted by avian botulism on one of our 3 refuges. And we'll learn more about that. But we as a Friends Group help provide the financial support of that support and that service. This year is scheduled to be to the tune of $40,000. And we're really honored to be able to rise up and meet that challenge, thanks to, again, the generosity of our community, and make sure that every bird that's transferred gets the care that it needs. Again, wildlife conservation depends upon the future. So we hit that with the littles through our education programs and our free busing, and the bigs through our scholarship program. And this year as well, we are targeting to give out $30,000 in scholarships. So again, we continue to grow our impact. And this is another one of those places we're just really honored to achieve an immeasurable impact as this works its way throughout the world. So if you are amazed and delighted, as I know you will be, with everything that is presented here today, I encourage you, if you're not signed up yet, there is a sheet on the back table, and then you'll be able to continue to follow us on our newsletter. If you're online, there's a link on our website, and we would welcome having you join our email newsletter. Volunteering, donating, becoming a member, following our work and our social media, and just being a part of our community. That's what we're here to help facilitate. Normally, this is where I champion the next event coming up, but December is just such a crazy one for everyone. We decided we're going to take that month off, but we'll be back in 2025 with a full lineup. So stay tuned, and our email newsletter is the best place to see when the next event will be posted. So stay tuned there. We have some folks in the queue, and we'll be finalizing that schedule soon. So enjoy your holidays, and until then, we have today just an incredible host of folks that represent a whole plethora of areas of this conversation about wetlands, how they help, how we help, and how you can help. So we're going to be joined by Helen Raine of Pacific Birds Joint Venture. There we go. Is that right? Yes. Okay, thank you. The delightful Helen will be up first. And then we have with us today Bryn Webber, who is the Refuge Complex Biologist, and then the incredible team from the folks from the Conservation Dogs of Hawaii Detector Dog team. So talking about a whole host of ways that we help and that you can plug in as a volunteer as well, based upon the incredible information that's going to be shared here. So with that, you came here to learn from these incredible folks. So I'm going to pass the microphone over, but I very appreciate our first speaker is Helen Raine.
Okay, everyone hear me okay?
And the folks online, just let us know if we need to adjust the mic. Otherwise, we're good to go. Thank you, Helen.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. I'm Helen Raine, the Hawaii Conservation Coordinator for Pacific Birds. And we are, as Thomas said, we're a joint venture. There's actually joint ventures across the whole of the US, and they all work in the same way. Basically building partnerships around a conservation problem and then trying to connect the members of those partners with whatever it is that they need. Right hand, Thomas?
Yes.
There we go. So these are just some images of the kind of places where we're working. We've got the Makauwahi Cave Reserve on the far side with their lo'i and their wetlands. There's Kawaiʻi, the Division of Forestry and Wildlife Sanctuary. The middle one is Ohiopilo or Molokai. It's the Department of Hawaiian Homeland Site, and we're supporting the department as they think about restoration. And then we do kind of outreach work, like this amazing albatross welcoming dance that was held a couple of years ago, participated in that. So mostly bringing people together, connections, outreach, that's how we work. So Kauai is extra special for water birds, and this is like the heartland of specialness. We're really where it's all happening. We've got some of the rarest water birds in the world, and most people who live here don't know that because they see them all the time. You know, you see Alaiʻula with its red frontal shield running around on the golf courses. You see stilt flying about. So it's easy to think there are tons of these birds, but the latest population figures were a little bit discouraging. I put the global population for each bird up there. That's what the latest paper is telling us. And, you know, it's probably a bit low. They can't possibly count every single bird, but it's in the index of the state water bird count, populations have been going down over the last 5 years. But we have the amazing success story of the Nene 50 birds or so in the 1950s up to, you know, we just saw some fly past right now. We see them all over the place. So we know we can do it. We know how to do it. We just need to kind of get over some of the challenges. Kauai is really the key to water bird recovery. Where we are the breadbasket. And, you know, probably most people in this room have a passion for birds, at least at some level. But there's a lot of other people who could care about birds if they knew more about them. And the Hawaiians in particular were really interested in these birds because of some of the things that they did. The Hawaiian wetland systems, the lo'i that grew the staple crop of taro, they were kind of expanding wetland habitat. That's what the Hawaiians were doing. And then the birds moved in. And so those two kind of came up together, the Hawaiian civilization developing and these birds thriving. And some Hawaiians thought of them as aumakua. They thought they were kind of ancestral spirits or guiding spirits. And they knew that they offered all of these different values, pest control. They featured really heavily in legends, and they're survivors, right? You know, a lot of the birds went extinct. These ones are still here. And this art is by some of the students at Chiefess Kamekaheli. So I love all the pictures that they come up with. It's so cool. So the alaiʻula, instantly recognizable with its red frontal shield. It was in the legends, the fire bringer, stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans because it felt sorry for them, and then got punished by Maui with burning of that frontal shield on. And they have those cool long toes. And studies by Charles Van Rees suggested that they're really fairly sedentary. They obviously got here somehow, so they flew a long way at one point, but they've kind of started to remain pretty much where they are. They don't fly that much. They use canals and alvae and all those different connectors to get around. So we need to make sure that we keep wetlands connected to each other. And we haven't recorded any inter-island movement either. I've got the alai keokeo, which has got a higher population, super lobed toes for kind of almost walking on water. And then the Io, the Hawaiian stilt, this one's a subspecies, and it's retained some of its predator strategies because some of the other birds evolved without mammalian predators, so they didn't really have to worry about predator strategies. Their strategy was to be on an island. But these guys have maintained some of their anti-predator strategies, so they might do a broken wing display. If you come near their nest, they're going to wave their wing around. And they can also generate their own air conditioning, so the parents will wet their feathers and then sit on the eggs to cool it down. Then the Koloa Maoli, this is my favorite legend, the blind warrior king who could throw 5 spears at a time, and they were guided by the Koloa Maoli. There's just lots of cultural connections, lots of people being in their lo'i and observing these birds and enjoying these birds and seeing them thrive. And we've also got a lot of migrant shorebirds and waterfowl. So we've got a bristle-thighed curlew over there on the headstone. That's actually in Oahu, but they do turn up here occasionally. Our beloved kolea and then the ulili, all coming to visit for the winter. They have cute babies, very cute babies. There is trouble ahead, but first of all, more cute babies because they're so cute. I'm sure you all know the trouble, right? We have got all these different rat species. Luckily on Kauai, no mongoose, which is one of the reasons our seabird populations and our waterbird populations are still around. But we have got American bullfrogs, and a study done by the Division of Forestry of Wildlife where they tagged alaiʻula chicks. They tracked one to the belly of one of these beasts because it had eaten the chick and the transmitter. So we kind of knew before that they ate them, but that was like the actual, more than just the smoking gun. And of course, cats. We can't say the keep cats indoors message enough, and that's the reason why here's, I think this might be one of yours, Bryn. Yeah, so here's an alaiʻula nest that Bryn was observing, and there's a cat headed towards it. And then we've got aerial predators, the barn owl and the cattle egret. Some of the other threats, again, pretty familiar here, tons of invasive species. This middle bird was a botulism victim. And then we had the massive floods, all of which continue. And then this week, really unfortunately, avian influenza arrived in the Hawaiian Islands. It was found in Oahu at a duck sanctuary, and they've dealt with those birds. Basically, they had to put the birds down, but we should all be looking out because, you know, it is very virulent and it can spread quickly. If you have any birds that you suspect of having died of avian influenza, you can call the Department of Agriculture. It's easy to Google it online. This is what you're looking for: neurological signs, respiratory, diarrhea, death, especially lots of birds being dead in the same place at the same time. And you do have to proceed with caution because it can transmit to humans. So just be a bit careful if you're picking up, well, don't pick up dead birds, basically. You want to call the number. But that shouldn't affect us looking out for fallout birds. Do still look for fallout birds. Maybe take some extra precautions, put gloves on, and contact SOS if you're picking birds up. So we've been thinking a lot about how we secure the future for water birds. They made it this far, right? They survived getting down to tiny populations, and they've recovered really well. And the reason for that is the refuges and sanctuaries, to a very large degree. They are the cornerstone of waterbird recovery. Can't do without them. Super, super important. And we've seen an upward trend in waterbird numbers over the long time period, but we've kind of plateaued, if not kind of starting to dip down a bit. So what we're doing at the refuges and sanctuaries is absolutely vital. We're holding the line, but we haven't really started to see a huge abundance again. And that's what we want. We want, you know, these birds to be everywhere and not to be constantly saying they're threatened and endangered, to have a different narrative of abundance. And the challenge is that conventional conservation is really expensive and it's hard to maintain long term. We are really lucky that we have Fish and Wildlife, we have DOFOR. They have invested massive amounts of time and money and passion to kind of keep these birds. But to turn the corner and kind of see the abundance we want to see, we've been thinking about, how do we do that? Like, how do we make that change? And one of the answers is in the idea of the traditional food systems that kind of help support the birds and create abundance in the past. And, you know, fish ponds, lokoʻia, loʻikalo, these are all ways in which birds can thrive and be abundant. Kalo is an essential Hawaiian food crop, and obviously it's cultivated in wetlands. And the Hawaiian farmers expanded wetland habitat in the Hawaiian Islands when they first arrived because they wanted more kalo. So they used aqueducts and ingenious water systems, and they created really big wetland areas, which was awesome for birds. So we're trying to think about how do we keep expanding that habitat, because it contracted massively as Europeans arrived, sugarcane, pineapple, all the bad things that we know happened to the islands. That was bad for these traditional agricultural systems, and many of them were lost. There's not much left. So we're thinking about how we can help to expand those. And this is what avian habitats look like now in Hawaii. They're a mix. You know, the top one is one of the wetlands at Makauwahi Cave. That's a managed wetland. There's the lo'i at the refuge. The bottom one's Kealia National Wildlife Refuge, which is just doing incredibly well for stilt. And then this is the Liliuokalani Trust, where they had a lokoʻia. They had lots of threatened and endangered water birds as well. So we know that lo'i can support birds, but we need to help with protection from predators, observation of nests so that farmers can avoid them, making sure there's water flows so that we don't get botulism outbreaks, and checking for carcasses. So, you know, farmers are doing their job and doing their thing, but they need some extra support with these additional things if they're managing for birds. And these kind of working wetlands, the idea of working lands, it's pretty common on the mainland. You know, rice is seen as a good place where agriculture and bird conservation can meet. And there's been a lot of work done to connect farmers and conservationists and kind of trying to expand waterbird and waterfowl habitat through working with rice farmers. So similar kind of thing here. These habitats already exist, the birds are coming to them. How can we help farmers to help them to thrive? And how can we make sure that there's equity and justice after all those land grabs? You know, we've seen in Lahaina what happens when corporations come in, do their thing, take the money and run and leave a wasteland. Then Lahaina was a wetland, and with all the scrub and so on, you end up with this huge fire risk, and then people and their livelihoods and their homes and everything disappearing. So thinking about the equity and justice side of it too. And I feel like the combination of having both of the systems as a safety net, you know, if you have a challenge on one or the other, whether it's water flow or whatever the issue is, if there's lo'i nearby and there's a managed wetland having a problem, the birds can move between and vice versa. So Kawanui Wetland, the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, recently reintroduced lo'i, and the manager there sends me these incredibly cool clips of his alaiʻula just like hanging out on the side of the lo'i while like dozens of school children tramp through. They're habituated to that, and they get on with their business, and they're nesting and doing really well. And at Hawaiʻi, there's a lot of evidence now that Indigenous agriculture supports waterbirds through all of their life cycle. And they've got both alaiʻula and ayo recorded as nesting in the lo'i. Erin Opie did a little bit of, well, quite a lot of work actually on understanding how that worked. So she looked at the different life cycles of the lo'i, from fresh planted all the way through to fallow. And then she plotted when different birds were using it. It's really interesting because you can see for the ayo, they're interested in these saturated soils. So when it's freshly planted and fallow, she's getting more birds. Whereas for the alaiʻula, they were using it more, at least for food in the harvest time, but maybe more than she has with this warm bird in the growing cycle. There could be nests hidden away in there. They're really difficult to find, as Bryn knows all too well. Like if they're right in the middle, they're hard to spot. So maybe more in the growing cycle, but definitely in the harvest. And then we have local ear. If you look at this kind of marshy habitat here at, this is Hawaiʻi again, National Estuarine Research Reserve, that's a great foraging habitat for waterbirds. So it's about working with managers of local ear to look at where are the possibilities where you can still be managing fish, but also be attracting birds. And Alakoko Fish Pond, they are exploring that right now. They've just redone the fish pond. They've sloped the sides to try and get that saturated soil that's good for the birds. The vegetation hasn't grown back yet, so there's no birds there yet, but it'll be interesting to see, to chart that over time, and we're monitoring. And incidentally, they do, I just went on Saturday, they do a monthly work day, which is really fun. They do a protocol to enter. The work is great, you get to meet other people, and then they do a killer lunch. So even if you just go for the lunch and, you know, do the fish pond wall to earn your lunch, it's well worth it. So Alakoko, this is what it looked like. I'm not sure whether that's even when they started. I think it might have even been more invaded than that, but huge mangrove invasion. And they spent a long time working with this amphibious machines to get it to this, which is, they're even further forward now. And the fish pond is about to return to a functioning state. We saw a spotted eagle ray in there, which was super exciting. And we've been tracking birds in there too. So they have all these species at the bottom. So we've really been thinking about how all of this coastal wetland habitat is integral to the native Hawaiian life and also to these native birds that we're trying to recover, and how just looking at opportunities to make those connections. And Dr. Scott Fisher of the Hawaii Land Trust kindly sent me these slides, just thinking out of the box, at least in terms of conventional conservation, about how you include different cultural aspects in your waterbird habitat, whether it's a managed wetland or a lo'i. And some of the things he was looking at were makaloa, which is used to make these mats, and the ahu ava, which was used to strain the ava drink. There's a picture of it there. And I was always fascinated by this protest mat. It's so cool. I feel like I need to go and see it in the Bishop Museum. Somebody actually wove their protest into a mat about higher taxation after the overthrow of the royalty. So definitely deeply rooted in history. And Scott also gave me this slide about how spiritual these places were. I was just at Loko Waka Fish Pond on Hawaii Island, and that is very strongly linked to the legend, this kind of legend of the mo'o, or the dragon, which was just entwined in the whole fish pond history. Oh, and the artwork is by Solomon Enos. I don't know if you've come across him before, but he does incredible depictions of the of kind of mo'olelo and figures in Hawaiian history. So it's worth looking it up. I loved how he imagined it. That's not how I imagined it at all. It's like really, really interesting to see what came out of his imagination. So to kind of bring it all together, our vision is a mosaic of interconnected wetlands across the islands and across the state, where the birds can move from one to another safely, where we have a combination of managed wetlands, indigenous agricultural spaces, and that we're managing them for people and wildlife. You know, they offer all those ecosystem benefits like flood control and water quality and sediment settling and recharge of the water table. And they also offer us a chance to recreate and be out somewhere beautiful and to reconnect with the land. And we had the Predator and Wetland workshop in April. And one of the things I heard a lot was that the future of wetland restoration and waterbird recovery probably depends on reconnecting people with the land rather than excluding them, or at least having a mixture of both. So you get people back in the land so that they see the birds and they care about them, and then they want to put hours in to protect them. That combination of different systems and different ways of management is how we're going to kind of see a change over time as people experience the birds, you know, in the place where they're from. But whatever system we're using, restoration is pretty critical. I'm sure all of you have seen these kind of situations: drought, dumps, invasive species. We have a lot of work to do, and we have to keep our foot on the gas at all times. Like, as soon as you stop managing, they just all come straight back. So we have to find a sustainable way to increase the footprint of wetlands, but keep being able to manage them in the future. So Pacific Birds put together a strategic plan. It was a massive undertaking, but we made it. We've described 73 wetland sites across the state. And then with a lot of partners in this room and partners across the state, we prioritized them using different criteria, like, are they climate resilient? Are they going to be here in 50 years, 100 years? Is there a manager in place who wants to work on conservation issues? What else? Like size, connection to other wetlands. And then we had partners kind of weight those values so that hopefully what we got out was the 20 most important sites at a state level. That gives us a clear steer. This is where we need to work. And we have island rankings, and we developed some strategies as well, all of which are pretty obvious. That's what you would imagine, but it was just good to hone those down and then put them in order of what our partners thought were most important to happen. So you can find this online and peruse it at your leisure. And these were the priority species, obviously the threatened and endangered, and then we had some focal waterfowl and migratory shorebirds. And these were our metrics. So this is what we're going to be looking at, like in 10 years, did we succeed? And we're also working on Hawaiʻi. So as I said before, the population estimate at the minute is 712 birds. We know there's a ton more in the ditches and things, like on the rivers that don't get counted. But still, that's a decline from the same counting method last time. So however you slice it, they're going down. So Pacific Birds has been working on the Hawaiʻi working group, thinking about, can we predator-proof fence some key sites where these birds still are? And then they've been extirpated from all the islands except Kauai and Oahu. So can we put them back on one of those islands? Because, you know, one hurricane, one big botulism outbreak, avian influenza, right? That could wipe out maybe one island's population. And if we have a third island repopulated as an insurance policy, but it's challenging. They went extinct there for a reason. And when PRC did the feasibility study, what they found was there isn't a wetland on Maui or Molokai or Big Island that's ready and waiting to receive them and has the conditions that they need. So we're going to need to do some more restoration. We need to understand what salinity they can tolerate. We need to do some monitoring and banding at donor sites. That's just a few of the preparatory things before we even start thinking about how do we do the reintroduction. So just kind of pivoting for a minute, how are we doing for time, Thomas? We're good? Okay. So one of the partnerships we work with, this was an existing partnership managed by Makaala Kaumoana, the Hanalei Watershed Hui. They've been looking at community resilience and flood control and how you marry that with creating wildlife habitat. So I just wanted to quickly go through the outcomes of that study. So we all know about the giant flood, and this study came out of that, thinking about how do we try and avoid that in the future. I don't need to tell you guys about the problems of flooding in the Hanalei Valley, but they're pretty severe. Obviously, the road collapsed. Hanalei got cut off for a long time. And so the objective was to try and think about what flood strategies could we use and which of those could include habitat for wetland birds at the same time, a kind of nature-based options, like a resiliency option. And so they studied the whole of this red area and the general basin to understand the hydrology, and did hydrologic and hydraulic modeling to evaluate different strategies that were proposed. There was a lot of community outreach. And these were some of the mitigation strategies that were looked at. So dredging the mouth of the river, would that make a difference? Does it actually help? Howe bush removal. What did the model say if you remove the howe bush? Did it improve flooding? Restoring river and floodplain connectivity, and then restoring wetlands or recreating wetlands to capture floodwater. The main takeaway was that there kind of wasn't an easy solution. The topography of this area is such, the mountains are really steep. When you get those massive rain dumps, the water just comes down so fast. Some of these options would slow it down. They'd give people more time to leave, more warning. You're probably going to save some life and property that way. But essentially, we kind of need to adapt and think of adaptation rather than minimizing these challenges. But the good news for the National Wildlife Refuge and wildlife is the opportunities to kind of redirect the way we think about flooding is good for wildlife. So creating more waterbird habitat, supporting the refuge and all the work they already do, that's going to help. It can't eliminate flooding. Essentially, nothing can do that, but it can reduce it. So the next steps, they're in the next step now, which is the 100% project design. And the refuge is looking at partnerships that will strengthen both refuge resilience and community resilience. And then what else do we need to do? Many things. We're basically going to have to work harder and smarter to kind of rise to some of these challenges. But I think for me, that the Hokuala Resort, they have a habitat conservation plan where they're essentially compelled to do really high quality predator control. And they also have Al Silver, who is like the man when it comes to predator control. He's an expert. And he's created on that resort incredible waterbird populations. So to a large extent, we know what we need to do, and it doesn't make it any easier, but we know we need excellent predator control. That's one of the biggest things. And then keep managing the habitat in a way that benefits the birds. So it's obviously more complicated than that, but you can boil it down to trying to do those simple things better, more expansively, supporting as many people as we can to do that, as well as all of these things. I think that's it. We have a website, we have a newsletter, Facebook page, so look us up and we'd be delighted to converse with all of you. Thanks, everybody. Any questions? Yeah, Mike?
Hitting our hopes on effective predator control is a dying hope. And I just hope that we all think fences, 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 because cats are increasing and people that love cats and feed cats are increasing. And as you know, I just think it's a losing battle to create without having fences.
Yeah, it's funny. At the beginning of this year, I wrote down 5 things that I felt like I needed to focus on to kind of make a difference. And one of those was fencing. And it is hard. They're expensive. They're likely to get more expensive with tariffs. But as I was looking at the waterbird declines, I was thinking about when the Humane Societies stopped accepting feral cats for euthanasia. And, you know, it was kind of a link temporally. We can't make that link scientifically, but I feel like the cat pressures are increasing. We can see it with our eyes. We know there's more feeding stations. We know there's more cats on the landscape. And predator control is hard unless you're a real expert. We do have some real experts on the island, but it's a craft, it's an art. And you're right, like it certainly won't be enough on its own. I'm a big fan of fences too. Yeah, I guess making them big enough that you still have that space. Talk more about that though. I'd like to hear more about your thoughts on fencing and size and all that kind of thing.
My question is about pesticide use and the connection between pesticide use and the eggshells of birds. I believe there was a link in the past, and I don't know whether, because I know pesticides and herbicides are used in the Hanalei Valley. And I'm just wondering, have you done any investigation into that?
Yeah, no, you're right that those kind of chemicals can definitely affect eggs and just general bird health. I don't know of any studies being done. Anybody else know of work done on that? Probably something that's needed, and I think about it a lot for golf courses as well. There's a lot of pesticide and herbicide use, and whether we could think about how to do that better, best management practices, that kind of thing.
Have some additional questions at the end, but
Okay.
our next speaker.
Hand over to Bryn.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. So transitioning now to our next phase of the talk. Thank you so much. That was an amazing overview. You just did a great job. And I feel like my first slide or two you already covered. So some of this will be review. So now we're, kind of taking the broad view of wetlands and conservation and waterbirds and kind of honing down on one issue. So Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge, as all of you know, Helen hit on this on one of her first slides that, this really is the single most important wetland for Koloa. They are on some of our other islands, However, on those islands, Oahu, they're highly hybridized. So those are no longer technically pure koloa. So Hawaii in general is, the last place left in the world for this species, and Hanalei in particular has the majority of those birds. So it is really a big kuleana to hold, but it is kind of our main focus for Hanalei. And we have found that when you create wetlands that koloa that the other birds actually follow. So they're kind of like our umbrella species is how we think about them. They're also, Hanalei is also one of the most important wetlands for Aleʻula in the state, I would argue. And they, Aleʻula are on both Oahu and Kauai, but in that recent study that Helen was referencing, although general trends over the last 40 years show water birds increasing slowly, over the last 11 years, we see most species having slight declines. So I think everyone's kind of coming together right now trying to figure out, what are these sources of declines, and, cats are high on the list. Botulism is one that everyone's talking about. So I think it's a very, timely talk today. So at Hanalei Refuge, though, we have commercially farmed taro. So this is going to be a little bit different than what Helen was more referencing in her last talk with, these agro ecosystems that are more like subsistence farmers. And yeah, so and we also have our managed wetland units, and these are intensively managed. So it's basically like farming wetlands. You have to go in there every 1 to 3 years and actually turn over these units as if you were growing a wetland crop. So they're kind of interspersed all throughout the refuge. So these are all managed wetlands. And then on the east side, we have the Kuna units as well. So what else was I going to say about this? Yeah, so our refuge, it does do a good job of kind of creating this mosaic of wetland habitats, because you have taro grown on a 12-month cycle, and the farmers are actually harvesting something at all times, right, for their commercial business. So they're harvesting in one unit, planting another, and we kind of have all these different habitats going on. So we do unfortunately have this problem with avian botulism. So avian botulism it's a naturally occurring bacteria that's found in the soil. It is bacteria. It's a type C botulism. I think there's a different. Trying to see if I think there's a missing slide in here, so I'll just kind of, I think I have some notes. So this bacteria produces a toxin, and that's actually fatal to many species of waterfowl, including our native waterbirds. So there are many different types of botulism. This is botulism type C that we're dealing with here. Humans can get a type of botulism, but it's not this one, thankfully. And on the mainland, outbreaks do kill thousands of birds. So this is something that a lot of different wetlands and waterbird managers are dealing with. It's just kind of heightened here because, of course, our birds are so critically endangered. So once the bird ingests this toxin, it actually causes paralysis and loss of motor function. So what you'll see in the field is birds, on the side of a taro lo'i, just kind of with their neck down, dead in the water, as they've unfortunately, their neck has become paralyzed and they drown. So it can happen really fast. We think sometimes even less than within 8 hours of ingestion. So I have seen some occurrences of potentially birds that have survived longer, but if they don't receive treatment, they're usually dead within a few days, maybe up to a week is when we saw this year. And then conditions favorable for botulism outbreaks. This is something that we don't actually fully understand. We're constantly doing more research and trying to understand botulism, but the ones that we do understand are that it requires warm temperatures. So we're in Hawaii, so check that box. It also requires a high protein source availability and an anaerobic environment. So that just means, stagnant water with little to no aeration. So how does this work in the environment, and what can we do to break the cycle? So you'll see here we have like a little Koloa duck feeding in a kind of an edge of a wetland. And what happens is, you know, these ducks are dabbling ducks. They're going down in the lower layer of the soil underneath the water. And that is exactly where these bacteria live in the soil. And given the right conditions, you'll see a flourish in this botulism bacteria. However, it's invisible, of course, to your naked eye. You can't see it. That bacteria starts producing these toxins. The ducks come in, start feeding on different invertebrates in the soil, ingest these toxins, and then will die pretty quickly. And then, you know, flies come in, they lay eggs on the carcass, and those hatch really quickly into maggots. What is a favorite food of a duck? It is unfortunately maggots. So the ducks or other water birds will come around and start feeding on carcasses on maggots. And each one of those maggots is basic, almost like a fatal dose. Like I've read 1 to 2 maggots of from a botulism carcass can kill a bird. So this is where we actually can come in and break this cycle, though, because if you're able to collect carcasses at that early phase before, you know, the eggs of those fly eggs have even hatched, you're able to interrupt this cycle. So that's why it's so important that, you know, we have eyes on the ground out there constantly looking for outbreaks. And yeah. So I just wanted to throw this map in here. Last year we had a detail at the Refuge who was very savvy with all of his GIS programs and mapping, and created this app for us to be able to enter our botulism detections and kind of see them in real time. So it actually would be cooler if I had the link here, because I could, you know, use the toggle on the top and scroll around and zoom way in. But basically you can get a snapshot of what botulism looks like for a given amount of time. So like this screenshot I took was for the last 2 years, or from, yeah, basically January 1st, 2022 to yesterday. And you can see each bubble kind of shows how many birds. So this isn't just a couple birds here and there. Like I think some of the other refuges in Hawaii, they can have botulism, but it's nothing like what we're dealing with here, unfortunately. But tools like this really help us, you know, real time to focus our efforts and on, you know, stopping these outbreaks and mitigating water. So that's a whole different talk for another day, is the different things that we can do with water level management and working with our farmers to flush units. And yeah, it's a whole, like I said, a whole different talk. So we'll save that for another day. But the botulism surveillance volunteer program really is the bread and butter. So, you know, we only have about 4 staff members out there doing surveys, but our volunteers, we have a program right now of about 12 volunteers, very dedicated. Many of them are in this room right now. And each section of the refuge needs to be surveyed anywhere from 1 to 3 times a week. So that's just based on how, what botulism has looked like in that area in the past. And, you know, these volunteers are really important as they're able to, you know, find these carcasses and remove them. And that can actually stop outbreaks. So that is our best, you know, preventative tool. And then, you know, kind of the fun side of it is when you're able to actually find a sick bird before it's gone downhill too fast, and you can actually, we actually give an antitoxin shot to that bird. So it does work pretty well, and we do have good success with it. Even when the birds look like they're on the, you know, death's doorway, we can actually get them to SOS and turn them around, and then are able to release some birds back into the wild, which is always a fun day. Yeah, we're always looking for more volunteers. You know, people want to go on vacation, so we're always, you know, looking to add to this this volunteer force. Yeah, let's see. All right, and with that, I will turn it over. Yeah. Yeah.
Notice on the slide that shows the distribution.
Mm-hmm.
The east side of the river, there were certainly more fines there than on the other side.
Yeah.
Is there an explanation? Do you have an excellent explanation or theory why that is?
Oh boy, we could sit here for an hour. But so like that slide of the distribution, that was just since we started using that app, basically. So that was just since 2022. So I know you've been around for a while, and you remember when it was on the left side of the river, and we had huge outbreaks over there. And in the last, what was it, like 5 to 10 years, they've put a ton of money, time, and funding into getting a lot of those water flow structures changed so that you have a different sort of water flow. Like on that west side of the river, we used to have Lo'i that flowed from one Lo'i to the next. So you would never have fresh water coming in. You just have kind of recycled water going down the line. And then we would see, you know, more stagnant water and higher botulism in those areas because they're not getting a consistent flow of fresh water. So I think the reason why we're not seeing it on the west side as much anymore is those water flow improvements and just working with that farmer who we've kind of learned together over the years what's going to work and seeing, you know, the benefit of that. And the recent kind of outbreaks on the east side of the river, you know, before I started my current job, I don't really know what was going on. I think we still probably have some water flow issues, but I don't really know why it jumped over there when it wasn't over there before. So yeah, that's my long answer, short answer.
Thank you.
Generally, yes. It kind of just depends on the month. Yeah.
Question was regarding that same slide. There was no incidents on the refuge managed
Mhm.
Lois and plots. Is that because there was not equal time spent with the dogs around the refuge units, or there just isn't botulism in the refuge units?
Yeah, so it's like a combination. So we don't generally think that botulism has started in our, you know, managed wetlands. And because of that, we survey there less. But we do, you know, survey those areas once a week versus like a lot of the long-standing taro areas that have problems, we survey 3 times a week. But, you know, we're out there enough to know that there's not huge outbreaks going on. I think that was part of your question. What was it?
There was 0.
Yeah.
That whole, I guess,
Right.
that whole year.
2 years,
So
yeah.
it seems like the refuge units weren't part of
I mean, so we didn't find any there in those years. And but you know, back from your time at the refuge, there definitely would have been some dots on that map. We think those birds flew in from the taro areas and then started the outbreak over there. So it's really those first couple of birds that you get during an outbreak are like the most, you know, give you the most information about where it's coming from. And then when it gets out of hand, you're like, I don't know. Yeah.
programs having a real positive
Yeah.
benefit to the refuge by getting
Yes, exactly.
So we have a question on Zoom.
Oh.
And it's kind of an extension of what Tim asked really, but specifically more for you, which is to talk about the use of pesticides in the Lois fields here in Honolulu, which go into the river and then into the bay.
Yes, very good question. So pesticides are not used that I'm aware of, but maybe that's just a difference of how people, you know, say things. So some of the farmers do use herbicides. And in the last couple of years, we've been working with them to, you know, better understand how much they're spraying and where, as well as fertilizer. So we've kind of gone from a past of just kind of, you know, the farmers have been doing their thing for so many years. And in the last 5 to 10 years, we've been really ramping up this like reporting effort. A lot of these farmers are of a, you know, older generation. So reporting on, you know, paper data sheets and having troubles trying to figure out what they're writing, you know, so we're getting there slowly, but they do use herbicide to kind of keep the weeds at bay on the edges. And the unfortunate truth is that, you know, there are research publications that show that glyphosate, some glyphosate products can cause the lowered immune systems of water birds. So that's something that we're actively working on right now. And it's actually, we actually just brought it to the attention of our regional biologist. So she's actually assembling a team like as we speak to kind of look more into this issue and advise us more. So I'm really excited about that because it's been coming up a lot, and I'm excited to see what Bridget comes up with, and I'll hopefully have an update for everyone soon. So yeah, awesome.
All right. Thank you, Bryn.
Oh, sure.
You're on.
And clicker,
Can't do it.
clicker. Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about our dog team. And before we get into that, I just want to thank all the visual surveyors that, how many, raise your hand if you're a visual surveyor, because we've got quite a few in here, yeah. And I have to say, what a great team and what a wonderful project it is. And we're always looking for more people, and it's absolutely beautiful to be down in the Hanalei Valley in the early morning and going through going around the farms and being able to help save birds. So I'm part of the dog team. This is Marcia, and she has Koa, dog back there. You'll meet in a little while. And this is Karen, and this is Sadie. And my name is Deborah, and I have 2 dogs, but they're not here today. So we want to talk about the dog team because this is a project that started in, well, the trial actually was in 2018. And the reason why it was started was because we had the visual surveyors out there. And of course, visual surveyors are great when the bird is sick or it dies like right on top of the berm. Someplace that you come around the corner, you look down and you can see it right there. The visual surveyors are going to be able to find that bird. If you have a bird that's maybe, you know, plopped down right here in the dirt and the soil, then yeah, you're going to be able to see that. But there's other different kinds of environments down there. Not every farm is mowed perfectly or looks like a lawn. So that's what this slide is for. Let's see, I think I can, maybe one more, maybe. No. There we go. Thank you. So this is little Sadie. And as you see, she's going along the edge of the berm there, looking for any kind of birds. And now you see that she's in the weeds. She's looking for something. Now, visual surveyor might be able to find the bird here. But when you get into things like this, the bird's going to hide for cover. It's sick. It needs its protection. So it's going to go back down into the weeds. Well, that's where the dogs can come in, because the dogs, they can actually find those birds. This last one is, one more, there we go. This is Xena, this is my dog. And so you can see these weeds even are taller and more dense. Now, how are you going to find a carcass or find a sick bird in something like that? But you know what, our dogs can. Our dogs can find a whole bird, or they'll find just even a foot that's left of maybe one bird that possibly a cat got a hold of. So they're very effective. And that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about our dog team. No, right in. There we go. Okay, thank you. So in 2018, it was really a great idea for Fish and Wildlife Service and also the USGS service to come together and go ahead and have a trial, see if dogs could actually help find these birds. And these are some of the original people. This is the original dog, the first search dog down in Hanalei. His name was Solo, and he was just wonderful. And this is Kyoko Johnson from Conservation Dogs of Hawaii, Kim Uehara, Fish and Wildlife Biologist, it's retired now, and Dan, who I think went back to Montana, right? So they were part of the original team. And This was also some of the volunteers that were there and also some other parts of the original team. This is Michelle Reynolds from USGS, her dog Panda, Kyoko Johnson from Conservation Dogs of Hawaii. And what an incredible result this came up with all of our, whoops, let's see, I'll go back. So with all of the trials that they set out the hides, they had an algorithm where they would put these hides, where they'd put the carcasses. So nobody really knew. And they had the visual surveyors go out and try and find the carcasses, and then they had the dogs. Well, pretty much it came down to, it was about 57%, 56, 57% effective with the visual surveyors. It was 90% to 100% for the dogs who would find the hides. So we knew, we knew that dogs could really help out. And so we were just super lucky to be kind of involved. We were already visual surveyors. One of the first requirements of being on the dog team is that you do have to volunteer in the Lo'i, learn about the birds, learn about, the taro growth, learn, all of that before you can even start to think about training your dog. So you need to do that at least 3 months, and then you can go on. And that's what we're going to be talking about.
So the trial.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. This
You
is
want to
the
go back?
No, that. They saw it. So the trial was. Oh, sure. Is that good?
Oh, here we go. This is a dance.
Yeah.
Oh, she's got it.
You're good.
I'm good. Oh, good. The trial was really clear that the dogs can enhance finding the birds in the Lo'i, especially in more difficult environments. So the decision was made to try to develop a dog team here to help out in the wildlife refuge. And one of the first things to think about is the kind of dog that would be suitable for that particular job. And in detection dogs who do lots of different kinds of things, different qualities depend kind of on the job you have. But here in the Lo'i, our dogs are always on leashes. And so the keen sense of smell is critical. And no one breed is just perfect for everything. And many dogs have keen senses of smell and can do just fine. You don't have to have a particularly special dog. But when you think about the temperament of the dogs, they need to be adaptable, they need to be intelligent, but many dogs are like that. It helps if they're food motivated because it makes them much easier to train. In other detection situations, they use play as a motivator, but in the wildlife refuge, we can't do that. So food motivation becomes kind of a critical factor for our dogs. It's hard work in the wildlife refuge. Walking behind a dog, it's hard work for us and it's hard work for the dog. So it needs to be a dog that's physically fit, that's strong, that has a fair amount of endurance. And I just want to talk about Sadie for a minute, because I first met Sadie, and I'll probably cry, but she had just recently been rescued by Karen. She could hardly walk fast, and she just looked so unhealthy, but she was sweet and she was motivated by food. And Karen was dedicated. And the difference between Sadie at that point when we were evaluating her as a possible detection dog and what you see today is just amazing. So lots of dogs can be really good detection dogs, but they do need to have a drive and a keep going, kind of a strong work ethic. And the other thing that's pretty critical for them is and this can be taught, it doesn't have to be innate, is that they aren't too distracted by cats, other birds, people,
machines, so that they'll keep focused on the job that they have. And so I think I covered most of it. Talking about the age, the dogs that we worked with here, I think that Koa was probably the youngest dog, and he had had some scent training first, not with birds, just playing games with scent training. And he was about 1.5 years when he started the training on the birds. And I think Deborah's dogs were one was just a little bit older than that, and the other one was 4 or 5, and Sadie was 4 or 5. So yeah, so it's helpful to have a little bit of maturity before starting this kind of training, as opposed to starting. Whoops. Arrow. Whoops. The other arrow. Okay. Oh, yeah, just a little bit about the team here. So thinking about that kind of a dog, I was not involved in this at that time, but there were some very clear plans laid out by the Conservation Dogs of Hawaii in cooperation with the Refuge on what were some of the protocols that we needed to have in place for dogs to work in Hanalei. And the first thing was that any handler dog team, the handler would have to be trained to be a visual surveyor first. And Deborah talked a little bit about that, but the handler needs to know the birds, the land, the issues, before you even start working with a dog. So that's an initial requirement to be a part of the program. And then the dog needs to be trained. And scent training is good, but the dog needs to be trained on the birds for the wetland. And there's a training program, and then there's a certification test, and the dog has to pass the certification test before it's allowed to work in the refuge. We need to abide by the standard procedures from the Fish and Wildlife folks. And I was thinking, oh no, what is it that we need to do? Oh yeah, our dogs need to be on leashes at all times. That's part of Fish and Wildlife, and it's just for the safety of the dogs and the safety of the wildlife. I mean, I think my dog is wonderful, and I don't think he would harm anything. But there's always the exception, and we wouldn't ever want to be in a position where one of our dogs caused something to happen. And so our dogs are always on leashes, and that's I believe that's a national requirement, isn't it? Our dogs are muzzled. We don't have the muzzles on the dogs tonight, but I think Deborah has one in the back. These muzzles are made in New Zealand, and they're made specifically for each dog. They're very lightweight. The model was a muzzle that was made for racing greyhounds, and it's been adapted for use in detection dogs so that they can eat and drink and pant with the muzzle on. It doesn't constrict their muzzle this way at all, but it does prevent them from biting anything that they might bite. And then our dogs are volunteers in the refuge too. And the wonderful people at the refuge give them credit and count them as volunteers, and they have their own volunteer hours. So it's so anyway, it's important that the refuge, that the volunteers, our handlers and the dogs, get their report to the refuge on their hours and also their fines. And this protocol that we follow when we find a bird became really critical this week, and with much gratitude to Bryn when she found out about the avian flu on Oahu, and she sent out a message to all of us. Normally, if we find a bird, we pick it up and we take it to the office, and then it's determined it's what they're gonna, if they're gonna do an autopsy on it, if they're going to preserve it in any way or do any more research on it. But with the chance of avian flu around, we have a different protocol that we use. And much gratitude to you, Bryn, for being on top of that. I really appreciate it. As volunteers, we provide all of our own equipment, and we also provide our dogs' equipment. We have long lines, our leashes are 15 feet long, our muzzles, and then we have special harnesses that identify our dogs as volunteers in the field as well. So a little bit about our dog team, and then Karen's going to tell you what you can do next. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so a lot of people ask us, you know, how can we start? I have a dog, maybe my dog could do that. So as was previously mentioned, the first thing is that they must volunteer as a visual surveyor themselves and be trained for at least 3 months before you even think about starting the dog training. So, and then the dog training is extremely arduous. So it's about 6 to 8 months, very intense training. It's like, you know, 4 or 5 times a week. Deborah kept me going because there were a number of times I thought, I'm not sure I can, I can do this. But she said, no, come on, I'm going to meet you 7 o'clock in the morning and come out. And so, and Sadie absolutely loves it. I mean, I keep going because she loves it. She gets so excited. So, and again, it was mentioned about being food motivated. So we always have a high value treat. It's not just like the regular treats that we give our dogs, but when we're going out to work, they know it's a special treat and they really appreciate that. I mean, there's a lot of other details here, which, you know, like, you know, usually you have a specific command, you know, a lot is involved in the training. So I just wanted to just mention that, but also, you know, again, it's not a specific type of dog, a specific breed, you know, all kinds of dogs are able to do this. Right now, we only have the 4 dogs that are certified. So we definitely would welcome more dogs because they are so valuable. We were going to do a little demonstration. I notice it's getting very dark out there. We actually brought the dogs so we could do a demonstration for you to see how they behave and how they actually find these birds. So I'm not sure how that's going to work with it being so dark. Yeah, we're going to skip that. It's a shame. But yeah, I mean, the dogs absolutely love it. You know, I mean, for Sadie, it's like her highlight. You know, she knows when we put the harness on her, she knows she's going out to work and she's amazing. Is there anything else that, okay, all right, well, questions? Usually it's about, well, we do a couple of things. So the new Hanalei viewpoint that's opened, Deborah and I both take our dogs to do demonstrations there, but in the Loei, it takes maybe a couple of hours, usually at a time. Yeah, yes.
How many dog surveys?
Just, we each do one. Unless if there's an outbreak, if we're told that there's an outbreak, we'll just rally the dogs up and we'll do more. So we're sort of on standby if they are suspecting an outbreak, and we'll take the dogs in. And there was a time when there were outbreaks on different parts of the island. And so we'll also go, I mean, Deborah was like crazy busy. Was it last year or the year before, going to like a lot of places where they were having outbreaks.
Is it playing out that most of the sick and dead birds are found by the dogs?
Yeah.
And they did go back last year and kind of take a look through the files. And they said that, yeah, that the dogs were finding more than some of the visual surveyors. But, you know, that's not an exact study. I mean, we weren't doing a trial again or anything. But it is really incredible to watch these dogs. Like I said, they'll find just a foot, or they'll find, you know, just a part of a bird.
Yeah, a few feathers
or a
even.
duck nest. You know, so we know the duck nests are very cryptic. You can't find them, but when our dogs find them, of course, we back them right up and leave the area. But to be able to tell the rangers, oh, there's a duck nest right there, they can go out, put cameras up, and monitor it and all of that. So the dogs are finding more than even just carcass or the sick bird. It's a really success. They're very successful. Amazing to watch them.
Follow-on question from online. Have there been any outbreaks recently? So you're saying it's a while back. When was the last outbreak you can recall that maybe you got? Oh, hold on, Bryn.
When I started my position end of May, we were in an outbreak, so it was pretty bad for, yeah, that was like, I jumped right into the field and I was out there every day, June through beginning of August. And so I had a graph. It didn't show up and it didn't make its way into the presentation, but it was going to show like the seasonality of botulism and how we normally see more during the winter months for some reason in Hawaii. Yeah, it's a terrible time, I know. But on the graph, you would have seen that we had May and June, just a big outbreak this year. And then the previous year, I think was really slow, right? Yeah, so it just depends on the year. And, you know, November, like right now, is normally kind of like a high point. So we're on edge and we have nothing though right now, touch some wood, you know. So yeah.
People find birds in the water?
Sure, yeah. We, again, we won't go into the water, but I mean, if our dogs are interested and they'll go in. The farmers, of course, are very sensitive to our dogs going in, roots of the taro, so, or their growth of the farming. So we let them, it just depends on the unit that we're at, but our leash is about 15 feet, so we'll let them kind of go in as long as they're navigating around the plants. And if they smell something and there's a bird right there, they'll alert. Sometimes it's called a fringe alert. So we just have to know how our dogs, you have to know your dog. You have to know those clues that your dog is giving you on whether there's something. And so if there's something in the water that the dogs are very interested in, we just let the rangers know what they're going to. Our dogs can sense. Our dogs can sense birds on the other side of the boat. So there's something in the middle of the loading, even though we don't bring the dog into the loading, but walking on top, our dogs will alert. You know, even on the other, especially if it's a little bit. That helps. These are my two dogs. We have Luna and Zena. And what Karen was talking about, volunteer hours, these are their volunteer pins that they earned. So those were 500-hour volunteer pins. And they've actually gotten another 200. And then we wanted to have Sadie. Sadie, and now it's completely dark, so I'm afraid we're going to have to use the dogs to find our we're no use at all. But thank you very much.
Thank you. My goodness, that was incredible. Just the whole spectrum of incredible information and knowledge of how we are working together through collaborations and passions and solving this issue in so many different ways. So it takes all of us as a community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for your support and for these incredible speakers one more time, please. Thank you. Well, hello, everyone, and good night. Aloha.